Joining me on the program now from the Nathaniel Centre for Bioethics, Dr. John Kleinsman. John, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for the invitation.
Look, there's quite a big list of recommendations, I think 25 recommendations, and this proposed bill says, hey, let's apply them all. Some are better than others in terms of the recommendations. Yes, there are some safeguards, but mostly it's a liberalisation of the law. What are your main concerns, John?
Well, look, there would be four main concerns on my part. One is the removal of the 6 months clause, which would be a significant sea change. The second one is the implications for institutions or for care providers. If this bill was to be, or the recommendation around conscientious objection was to be accepted in the way in which it's currently stated, all care providers would have to actually allow for assisted dying to actually happen on their premises. So that's the second one. A third recommendation would allow doctors to raise the topic. I think there are a number of people who are very concerned about that, and as I am. And there's also the question then about advance directives, whether people might be able to make choices in advance and therefore receive assisted dying at a point in their lives when they were no longer competent. And that would, if it was passed, would also be a significant deviation from the current law.
There's certainly a lot to be concerned about there. One of the things about the legislation, even as it exists at the moment, even before these proposed changes have been recommended, is that there appears to be no actual choice here. It's end-of-life choice, but what are the alternatives if somebody is suffering, if somebody is in pain, if somebody is overwhelmed by their circumstances? This seems like an easy out, in particular if there aren't good palliative care services available.
Oh, look, and that's a point that a number of people are making. It's a point that we made 4 or 5 years ago. Access to palliative care in New Zealand, unfortunately, is dependent on your postcode. It's a postcode lottery. And you've made the point, well, everyone talks about assisted dying as a choice, but it's a false narrative when in fact there is really only one option. And I'm aware, as a number of your listeners will be, that hospices are struggling. And in fact, right at the very moment, a number of them are considering have to retrench and pull back on some of their services.
And one of the proposed amendments would mean that even health providers don't have a choice on this. The hospices won't have a choice as to whether or not they will be offering assisted dying. Medical professionals will have to either recommend or point a patient in the direction of somebody who can sign off on assisted dying. There's no choice either for the patient or for many in the health profession.
I would be less concerned about the implications for individual practitioners. Mm-hmm. As I see it, the changes there are not significant. At the moment, I think most GPs or most medical practitioners who decline to participate would simply say, look, you need to contact SENS. And if that means giving a phone number or website, I think we could live with that. The bigger concern for me is the fact that currently under the law, institutions or care institutions are actually able to say, this is not something we want to happen on our premises. The freedom not to participate was actually a cornerstone commitment of the current law. When you look at and analyse the debates that were happening in Parliament at the time, there were assurances that no institution will be forced to provide assisted dying on their premises, and that was clarified by a declaratory judgment sought in the High Court by Hospice New Zealand in 2020. So the freedom not to participate is in fact a cornerstone commitment of the current law, and the Attorney General at the time in fact reiterated that there was no interest in forcing anybody, let alone institutions, to do that. So this, if it was implemented, would be a significant departure from that.
And, of course, this was a bill which had a referendum associated with it, and actually what people voted in on the referenda had the checks and balances that we've talked about beforehand, those same checks and balances that are being removed by this proposed legislation. If the original legislation was in the form that is being proposed at the moment, probably wouldn't have passed the referenda, John.
Look, I think you're absolutely correct, Andrew. And the removal of the 6 month clause, I think, is a very, very good example. Todd Stephenson maintains that it's just a tweaking, and he has a comment in a Radio New Zealand article that in fact all of the safeguards remain. The 6-month clause is in fact a significant safeguard. It's about ensuring that this was something of last resort for people, that it was only for people who are dying. Once we remove that, we are getting into and moving down this exactly the same path as Canada has gone, where the track 1, which is about foreseeable natural death, was supplemented by what they call in Canada a track 2, which means that there is no need for foreseeable death for people to actually have access to assisted dying. So it's a significant change, even though Todd Stephenson himself is denying that.
One of the perhaps the reasons that the referenda passed is because people are compassionate towards people who are suffering. They're compassionate and perhaps see themselves in that situation and say, hey, what type of rights and opportunities and choices would I like to have if I was in that situation? Look, I understand why you are opposed to these proposed changes, but I suppose finding some space for being compassionate for people who find themselves in absolutely desperate situations where they would even consider wanting to end their life.
Well, look, that was the argument that was proposed at the time when this was going through Parliament. In fact, when you look at the evidence overseas, we don't collect good evidence in New Zealand. That's an area of concern for a number of us who are in the bioethics field. But when you look at the evidence overseas, and anecdotally, some of the stories that are coming through from New Zealand, people aren't choosing this generally because they are in extreme physical pain. They may be fearful of pain, but the key drivers for this are in fact existential, in the sense that people fear being a burden, that they fear being dependent on other people, that they fear what it is like to live with significant disabilities. That's not about pain and last resort.
Hey, John, appreciate your thoughts and comments, your viewpoint on this. Thanks so much for being on the program today.
Welcome, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.